and welcome to another episode of Amari Music Talk, the podcast that is always on the one. All right, I'm Richard Cole. Welcome back if you're a long-time listener. If you're new to the channel, welcome aboard. It's been a pretty big milestone. Hit 500 subscribers on YouTube. I know that Amari Purple Talk had been in existence as a podcast for a number of years, and as a podcast it was very successful. But since I've only been spending like the last year or so really focusing on YouTube and doing videos to reach this milestone, it's definitely a blessing. I'm grateful. Thanks to all of you for making that happen, and let's continue, let's keep growing, and let's keep it going. Alright, so I wasn't going to do a video not for a while because I'm trying to finish the Reset EP. So I'm working on some new music and also trying to finish The Answer, which is a comic book that I'm working on. So trying to get those two things finished before I work on more videos. But one of the videos that I had done a while back about my 3 favorite funk guitarists, which was Jimi Hendrix, Eddie Hazel, and Jesse Johnson, that had been getting some traction on Facebook. And you know, thanks for the response. A lot of great comments. One of the things I took notice of was, you know, people were shouting out their guitarist, or, you know, what about this guitarist? What about that one? And, you know, this was never about, you know, these 3 being greater, better, or whatever. I mean, they are great. You know, Hendrix laid a foundation. We'll get more on that in a minute. You know, Eddie Hazel was great. Both of those guitars had a huge impact on Jesse Johnson, and it's kind of that link and just their playing. You know, that's my personal pick for the top 3. That's no slight against everybody else, but the reason for this episode, in those comments, there was a lot of love and a lot of praise for Ernie Isley. So I was like, well, you know, I was planning on doing one for the longest, but, you know, since, you know, he was in such great demand in those comments, I thought I'd go ahead and devote this video and dedicate it to the great Ernie Isley. My previous job, you know, prior to the one that I'm working at currently, the previous job I had more contact with the public, and, you know, I had an opportunity to meet him. You know, inside I was, you know, like, it's Ernie Isley, but, you know, I also had to be professional and all of that. But, you know, nice man, great family and everything. So, you know, I was grateful for that opportunity. So, like I said, I've been wanting to do an episode for the longest time. So here was this opportunity to do it. So let's get started. Alright, so Ernie Isley, member of the Isley Brothers, the original 3 Isley Brothers. You know their hits Shout, you know, Twist and Shout, you know, the Rock and Roll Hall of Famers. You know, those songs are classic. You know, the Beatles covered Twist and Shout. They covered Shout as well, but on stage, never on record that I know of. But you know, huge impact on rock and roll, on R&B. You know, they were on Motown briefly. Had a hit, This Old Heart of Mine. And during that period, they had Jimi Hendrix playing guitar with them on stage. And you know, I think for a lot of people that were, you know, kind of shouting out Ernie Isley or saying that, oh, Hendrix didn't do funk. Well, you know, let's kind of, before we get deeper into the history of Ernie Isley, because it's intertwined with Ernie Isley. Now, you know, at the time that Hendrix was in, you know, as a stage musician for the Isley Brothers, Ernie was, grade school, going into high school during this period. Um, Jimi Hendrix stayed at the Isley Brothers home for a while during this period. So, there's an interview, where Ernie says, well, music really wasn't an aspiration. He was a kid, he was in the playing baseball, he was busy, chasing girls and going to school, and when you're that age, that's the thing that's paramount. It wasn't, until he himself got a chance to play drums, not only for the Isley Brothers, but for Martha Reeves and the Vandellas. And then the attention he was getting from the girls his age, just off of that, that attended that show, that was like, okay, all right, I'm going to take this a little bit more seriously now. So, I know for a while there were people that thought Jimmy taught Ernie how to play, but that necessarily wasn't true. But Hendrix was definitely an influence on what Ernie Isley does. And again, to talk about that funk connection, everybody remembers Jimi Hendrix and the Experience, or the image that, the non Hendrix fan, or maybe even the most casual Hendrix fan, it's Jimmy and the Experience with Noel Redding, with Mitch Mitchell, the two white guys. But, if, like I said, if that's all you know about Jimi Hendrix, and just Purple Haze and maybe Along the Watchtower, Foxy Lady or something like that, then, Jimi Hendrix was blues based. The psychedelic stuff, he fused the blues with the psychedelic stuff, and what Clapton was doing, and Pete Townsend, and, he was a force to be reckoned with. He was a force of nature. Even they had to kind of like, who, yeah, this is the dude. This is the man. And by 1970, going late 69 going into 70, then you get this, concept of the band of Gypsys. Now, how all this relates to funk, really, even with the Experience, Jimmy's first album, Are You Experienced? That album, the Beatles, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, and Sly and the Family Stone's first album, A Whole New Thing. A lot of people think that Dance to the Music was the first album, but Dance to the Music was the first hit. A Whole New Thing is a great album. Actually, a lot of hip hoppers have sampled stuff off of that, but it is truly a musician's album. But that's another topic for another day. But those three albums influenced George Clinton to create Funkadelic. So, fast forward to like 69, 70, Jimi Hendrix comes out with the band of Gypsys. So it's no more Noel Redding, it's no more Mitch Mitchell. He's got Buddy Miles on drums. He's got Billy Cox on bass. And that band of Gypsys album, for those that aren't familiar with it, this is the album, Band of Gypsys, and this is the funk. Who knows? That's another track that had been sampled by hip hoppers as well, most notably Digital Underground. I think, for the Way We Swing, I think is the track in which they sampled Jimi Hendrix's Who Knows. And let's see, not a lot of, let's see the back cover here. So there's Billy Cox on bass. There's Buddy Miles on the drums. And this was a heavy, funky record. He was trying to go in another direction with his music. I also have from the Jimi Hendrix estate, their Dagger Records imprint. So they kind of released the demos and kind of like the bootleg recordings. So this is the Baggies rehearsal sessions when they were rehearsing for this gig. And in fact, I've got the complete Fillmore East sessions of the band of Gypsy. So enough of that context out of the way. Hendrix is funky. So now we fast forward back to Ernie Isley. And yeah, I mean, it's not only the Hendrix influence. I think Ernie Isley has his own distinct style. Yes, Hendrix definitely an influence. I know one magazine article on Ernie had mentioned, like Santana, and when I read that, and I really started to reflect on a lot of Ernie's solos, and I'm like, yeah, it does kind of have that Santana tone to it. It's like, yeah, I can see where people can't make that distinction. Where yes, Hendrix is definitely rooted in blues, just like Eddie Hazel, just like Jesse Johnson. They're deeply rooted in blues. But Santana, according to Prince, plays prettier. So I can kind of see that same thing with Ernie Isley. It's like, yes, definitely the Hendrix influence is there, but it's prettier. It's prettier, and it's and it works, and it's a definite, it's his definite style. And again, this is another guitarist that I think should be mentioned in the same breath as as a Jeff Beck, or as a Jimmy Page, a Van Halen or something. And again, those guys are great for what they do, but a lot of times in the mind of these, classic rock, it's that, we all are guilty of that sort of 2 block window of the world. And it's no matter how much of the world we've actually seen, but when we hold on to those teenage years, when it's like we barely left the bedroom and our stereo systems and we're immersed in this world, and the impact that that record of the moment has on you, it's easy to get locked into that and just say, oh, well, this is the greatest thing ever and nothing else counts, and that's, sometimes you got to open up, you got to open your mind. I mean, music is subjective. Yep, what I like, you might not like, vice versa. But I don't think that, an Ernie Isley or an Eddie Hazel, a Michael Hampton, I don't think these guys should be forgotten. I don't think that they should be swept under the rug, or this notion that funk music is disco, and that's bullshit too. So, we got, it's all coming from the same source, whether it's the blues, whether it's R&B. Now, granted, some of those so-called classic rock cats, a lot of heavy metal is based on classical progressions, and that's cool, and that's an innovation. But there's a layered track. I think it's Hendrix's Easy Rider. I can't think, or is it Room Full of Mirrors? It's one of those 2 tracks. I have to go back and listen, or go back and watch the Band of Gypsys documentary, where Eddie Kramer points that out. But there's a guitar layer, where Hendrix is kind of going Stravinsky on you on the guitar, So I mean, again, it's all subjective, and everybody's great at what they do, but I don't think that one should be propped up over the other. If they all doing rock. That lady, number 6 on the pop charts. It was number 2 R&B, but it was number 6 on the pop charts. And I mean, that 3+3 album, and that's where the beginning of Ernie's playing really begins to shine. You have, I think there's 3 other albums before 3+3, to which, yeah, they're the younger brothers, Marvin Isley on bass, Ernie on, lead guitar, Chris Jasper on keyboards. That was there prior to that lady. But the 3+3 album, to me, is just as much of a classic rock album as it is a classic R&B album. And I think what makes it so great, just like anything the Rolling Stones would do, they've got some hard, heavy rock, they got some blues, they got some country, and they got some R&B on their albums. And I think that 3+3 stands up to any one of those Rolling Stones albums from that period. And that's not saying anything negative about the Stones, but like I said, that album is just as important. 3+3 is just an important album. There's covers. Summer Breeze is on that album. What else is on that? Don't Let Me Be Lonely Tonight. There's some great covers on there. But, That Lady, as far as original composition, that's a great track. Like I said, that track itself was number 6 on the charts. And I remember being like 7 and just hearing that on all radio at the time and just being mesmerized by it, in the guitar. Love the song, I love the melody, the lyrics, Ron singing on it, but, it was that guitar solo, and the riff, that was very mesmerizing to me at like 7 at the time in 1973. So, I used to have a lot of the stuff on CD. Had to end up selling half of my CD collection, had lost most of my vinyl collection, and it spent like a lot of years rebuilding that. So just now starting to get back into it. So 3+3 is one that I really definitely have to have, either both on vinyl or CD. I plan to get that at some point. But as far as other particular standout guitar playing by Ernie Isley, definitely get on your streaming service, check it out. Most importantly, buy you some physical media, and get that as well. But one thing I did manage to recover, at least on vinyl, I used to have this on CD, is the Go For Your Guns album. And probably for me, after 3+3, this would probably be my next favorite Isley Brothers album. I know before I started getting the CDs and the albums, I used to have the cassette, the Isley Brothers Greatest Hits. Used to have that, and that got continuous play in 1995. What did I used to have back then? Was that I think that was the Geo. I think that was still the little Geo Storm. Was rolling in the cassette, and that was in continuous play. Sade was in continuous play. Lots of Tupac was in continuous play during that period of 1995. But yeah, but as far as getting the actual CDs, this replaced the CD that I used to have. And as far as tracks to check out, Voyage to Atlantis is probably my next favorite, as far as where Ernie gets to really shine on the guitar. That is my favorite. And again, talk about this is like if Hendrix was still alive, in the 70s, in 1977. I don't think he would have gone disco. I think he definitely would have gone jazz. As far as talks of him jamming, wanting to jam with Miles Davis or something like that. But I think as far as like maybe R&B, Voyage to Atlantis, that is definitely a Hendrix lane. If you listen to something like Have You Ever Been to Electric Ladyland, from the Electric Ladyland album, that's kind of got that little Curtis Mayfield kind of feel to it on that track. And as far as like Hendrix lyrics, a lot of times, he's very into science fiction. So you get a lot of that cosmic stuff. See, you got the Parliament Funkadelic connection right there, because that's their whole thing, space, fantasy, and all that other stuff. So again, Hendrix kind of cracked open that door so George Clinton and the whole P-Funk mob could take it to the next level. And then you got Ernie Isley and the Isley Brothers taking it into another level with That Lady, and then Voyage to Atlantis. Again, it's in the title, Voyage to Atlantis, and the imagery, it takes you there. One of my favorite guitar solos. So definitely an album to check out. It's got Pride, it's got Footsteps in the Dark, a couple of other favorite tracks that are on that one. And then Showdown is the next one. Take Me to the Next Phase and Groove With You, they're kind of like my favorite tracks on this particular album. But like I say, and then there's, Ernie right there representing with the guitar, with the guitar. But yeah, this is like I say, plan to kind of just rebuild my vinyl collection and CD collection with the Isleys. But one final thing I want to talk about as far as how great Ernie Isley is. And I got to give a shout out to Living Colour's leader and lead guitarist Vernon Reid. He's got this kind of not quiet campaign, but a campaign to get Ernie about 10,000 followers on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it. I think right now it's about 9,000, in the 9,000 range. So I'll put the link up there in the show notes. So definitely, show some praise, show some love. He's still with us. The Isley Brothers are still doing their thing. So while they're still here, let's, whatever, what do you want to call it, third act or whatever, let's go out on that high note. Let's give them, some love and some praise. Don't let them be forgotten. We still talking again. I watch all these YouTube videos and people I respect doing shows and everything, and I like their shows and the information that they give. That the Beatles, and they talking about this, again, whether it's Clapton or Jeff Beck or Jimmy Page or Pete Townsend or a Yes album or a Rush album or Blue Oyster Cult, whatever, then let's show some more love to some groups that are adept as well, that are great as well. Funkadelic is great. All the guitarists that have come through Parliament Funkadelic. The whole Minneapolis crew, whether it's Sonny T, whether it's Jesse Johnson, whether it's, St. Paul, Prince, definitely. Most of the episodes here about Prince. But like I said, I want to end this episode on this note. And like I said, thank you to Vernon Reid for turning me on to this album. Like I said, for me, kind of as a kid and growing up, it was like they went from the whole twist and shout to, This Old Heart of Mine. Then a couple of years go by, then it's, It's Your Thing. And then I just thought there was this gap, like nothing was happening. And then bam, 3+3 comes out with That Lady. But, don't sleep on those albums in between It's Your Thing and 3+3. Because out of those 3 albums, we get the Isley Brothers live. And on this album, they also did a studio version of this cover, and it is Crosby, Still, Nash and Young's Ohio, which is a song about the Kent State murders, where the students were shot by the National Guard, during their protests and everything. So that song, even by Crosby, Stills and Nash, is a great and moving song, heavily inspired by the events of that period, which, we need more music like that today. I mean, sometimes an escape is cool. Sometimes it's cool to dance and party and get funky. But, let's go back to our Curtis Mayfields and our Bob Dylans and, our John Lennon's Give Peace a Chance and Imagine. Let's start getting back to that and start giving some folks some hope. Because, it's getting a little crazy. It's always been crazy. But it's like the crazy is too consistent. We need to balance that stuff out a little bit. So, but this cover of Ohio, and to me this is like one of the early mashups, the invention of the mashup, because they mash it with Jimi Hendrix, the band of Gypsys, Machine Gun, and I mean, and it's a beautiful mix of the two. And like I said, with the live version, Ernie gets to show up and show out on that track. And like I said, I didn't even know this. I mean, I've seen this album a lot, And I just thought, like, it didn't have that lady on it. It didn't have Boys to Atlantis. It was done before 3+3, and it was just kind of like, well, I don't know. But by all means, definitely, if you can, I know you can find, like, this is a very well-loved copy that I found. So you can find this around. You can probably go on Discogs, maybe somebody's thrift store or something, record store, mom and pop record store, they would probably have it. So at least you can find it on vinyl, if nothing else. It is available on streaming, because I think, the minute I read Vernon Reid's tweet about this song, then I jumped on Tidal, listened to it, and was like, I got to have that album. So, yes, definitely, Ernie Isley is the guitarist you need to hear now. So go to your streaming, go to your record store, go to Amazon, wherever you get your physical media, or wherever you get your streaming on, by all means, check him out. And thanks and peace to Ernie Isley. Thanks for being part of such a wonderful group. I'll do more videos on the Isley Brothers in general, but definitely check this out. So I'm Richard Cole. This is our tribute to Ernie Isley. This is Amari Music Talk. Hit like, subscribe, hit the notification bell. Thanks for the 500 subscribers. Like, subscribe, even get on Patreon, become a Patreon supporter. And I'm out. Create your day, create your life. Peace.